Evening and welcome to tonight's Ask a Bishop. My name is Katie Webster. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement at Ohio Wesleyan. The Ask a Bishop series was established to engage with alumni and friends and highlight a different topic of interest featuring OWU alumni, faculty, staff, and students. Tonight's Ask a Bishop, the Future of OWU, is meant to educate Ohio Wesleyan alumni about what it means to be a first-generation college student and share how first-generation students are the future of Ohio Wesleyan, how alumni can help and friends, both financially and through volunteerism, and to learn first and foremost from our guests this evening about their experiences at Ohio Wesleyan. I want to offer everyone the opportunity to invite your questions into the chat feature tonight. We will be moderating that. And also, before I turn it over to our moderator, Jason, please indicate your name, your class year, and also if you are a first-gen student in the chat. It's nice to know who is with us this evening. I'm pleased to introduce tonight's moderator, Jason Timpson. He is our new Director of Multicultural and Student Affairs, and I will go ahead and turn it over to Jason.
Hi, thanks. So again, Jason Timpson, Director of OMSA. The Office of Multicultural Student Affairs now includes Global Majority Initiatives, the Women's Resource Center, as well as Spectrum, which is our LGBT plus center. And so I'm happy to be here, been here since August. And so glad to be able to frame this conversation and moderate, an important conversation here within OWU. So let's jump in. So making the move from high school to college is a dream for many students. However, some students don't have the blueprint to be able to navigate this transition. Many colleges and universities are now boasting about their outreach efforts and support for first-generation students. While these efforts are noble, they are plagued with inconsistencies and stereotypes on who can be classified as a first-generation student. A research article entitled "Talking About My Generation, Defining First-Generation Students in Higher Education" describes 8 different ways a student could be classified as first-gen. Some of these classifications include parents have at most a high school degree, parents have at most started but not completed an associate's degree, parents at most have completed an associate's degree, and parents at most have started but not completed a bachelor's degree. For each of these categories, 2 variables were then created depending on whether both parents or one parent met that criteria. As we can see from these definitions or these classifications, they don't always include siblings, extended family members, or mentors. While we examine the label of first generation, we need to examine how this label can be used and or interpreted. Is it designed to uphold problematic systems? Or is it a label in place to be able to help students access resources that they may not have the opportunity to access otherwise? As we can see, the definition of first generation is complex, and the first generation designation may be useful for some students. This designation allows students to get connected to social groups, resources, mentorships, and other opportunities that will help them attend, persist, and graduate from a 4-year institution. The identity of a first-gen student is not a monolithic one. Each student enters and leaves the university with their own story, which includes trials, things they wish they knew that others already seem to know, and struggles to adjust to new norms. Their stories also include successes, powerful connections, meaningful experiences, and achievement toward reaching their goal of graduation. Today, we'll hear from a few folks within OWU's first generation community, and I'm going to invite each panelist to introduce themselves, and then we'll start our conversation. So first, let's hear from Craig Luke, class of '85, first gen student, and OWU trustee.
All right, good evening, everyone. I guess we're going age before beauty in this case for the panel. But thanks to Katie and the alumni staff for inviting me to do this. I think this is a very important session that needed to be done. But like I said, I'm Craig Luke. I graduated from Ohio Wesleyan in 1985. I was an accounting major and English lit minor. I live here in Atlanta. I've been here since 1985. I also have an MBA from Georgia Tech here in Atlanta. My career has been primary since 1986, has been in banking. Sorry about that. career has been in banking since 1986. I currently work for Fifth Third, that's based out of Cincinnati, but I'm here in Atlanta. As far as my first gen, my parents did not go to college, but I'm the youngest of 6 children, and all of my siblings, the second of one, went to college. So, and 4 have college degrees and 3 have masters. So my first gen definition is that my parents didn't go to college, but I had siblings that went to college.
Awesome, thanks. Next, let's hear from Mallorie Watts, class of 22, so she's still with us, who does a lot on campus. So those things include community service learning office intern and social justice student assistant.
Hi, I'm Mallorie. I am a social justice and politics and government double major. So my involvements in the past have been WCSA. I did mock convention. Dylan did mock convention with me. Community service learning office. I saw Sally is here. Thank you, Sally. And yeah, so I've done, I'm an RA too, almost forgot that. And my dad has an associate's degree. My mom didn't go to college, but there's still most of that. I was pretty much on my own when it came to navigating college. One thing I like to say that's part of my first gen experience is when I tell people in my family that I'm an RA, they usually don't know what that means. And then I'm like, I don't really know how to describe what it is that I like do as an RA. I have one relative, they say, you're a house mother. And I go, sure, we'll agree on that term. That's fine. But yeah, and I have a twin brother who he started college a semester after I did. And it's kind of been I've been really into the first gen identity, and we've kind of had a lot of conversations about that. So that's been really cool to have someone my age, and it's my twin brother. So we're really close talking about our experiences being first gen.
Very nice. And I'll say, as a person who works in higher ed, trying to explain to people what we do and how we do it, they don't get it, right? So they have no idea what we're doing here. So thanks for your time as an RA. Okay, so we'll round out our group with Dylan Hayes, recent graduate and alumni board member class rep.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dylan. I graduated this past May, so 2020, probably the best year to graduate, honestly. Currently, I'm a graduate student at Clemson University, and at Clemson, I work with our student leader development programs and initiatives with that. At OWU, I did a ton of different things, and I'm not going to list them all off for you, but I think that first gen identity was a huge part of that, my entire experience. Even from when I first came on that summer orientation to sign up for classes, I think that that saliency of that identity is when that first started. And now being on the other side of that, almost kind of a year since COVID happened, I love campus. It's been really interesting and enjoyable to be able to have that experience rounded out. As for first gen status, neither of my parents went to college, but my older brother actually completed his associate's degree this past December. So that was a really cool moment to see him accomplish that.
Very nice. All right, so we'll jump into our questions. Remember, audience members, if you have questions or things that you would like to share, please throw that in the chat. And shout out to all of you folks who are part of the OWU community. I'm looking on my second screen to see all this goodness, so I appreciate it. All right, so our first question is, how do you see your experiences being different than your OWU friends or other folks that you went to high school with? So from your first gen lens, how do you see your experiences being different from other OWU students or folks that you went to high school with?
I can go first. For me, this was like one reason or one way that I could really see it was when I first got here, a lot of students were talking about the honors program, and I was like, we just got here, like, how are you in the honors program? I don't even know what that is. or there were different I think there was like the Global Scholars Program. And I was like, I don't know what any of these are, whatever. And then I met the amount of kids I met who had parents with PhDs. I was blown away. I just was like, I think, I thought getting a PhD was just super rare, even though I was at college where most people have your professors have PhDs, but I just didn't put that together. And they're like, yeah, my mom has a PhD. And I was like, what? Or, I had a roommate and she called her mom. She was like, I need help on this bibliography. Does this look okay to you? Like, does my paper sound good? And I was like, you guys call your parents to help you with your homework? Like, it's the other way around for me. Like, I don't know if I had asked my mom, Mom, what's the difference between Chicago style or MLA? They'd look at me like I was speaking a different language. And I just couldn't. I was like, I don't know anything about that. I would definitely never be able to call my parents and, ask them for help on my homework. So that was definitely one way that I definitely felt like I was like, I am totally different here.
I'll go. I guess for me, and back in the 80s, we didn't have, like, first gen was not a label or nomenclature or anything for students. I guess for me, being African American and then also being first gen, I guess there was that intersectionality. I'll bring it current to today's lingo. But me, my high school was a college preparatory high school. It was a public school, and it was multicultural, and you took an admissions test to get in. It was 7 through 12, so it was all about 90% of the students went to college. So I had kind of eased into an environment, but I also say that after school, I went home to my family. So, but then, after graduation, coming to Ohio Wesleyan and being dropped off in a dorm where I was the only African American in the dorm, it was different, but I knew that it was something that I had to do, and it was kind of like a sink or swim. My parents, I wasn't coddled or anything. It was kind of sink or swim and make the most of it. But being around students who were for me, it was like being around students who were very wealthy and students that had been to Europe and had been to all these different places and go on vacations every year. And, their parents send them money, for allowance and stuff like that. It was very different, seeing it up close. Whereas in high school, it happened. But like I said, I was still going home. Whereas at Ohio Wesleyan, this was my home now. So how do I acclimate and navigate this system? So for me, it was just kind of a slight culture shock of being around students who were very, very different backgrounds for me. Whereas before, being up close and personal, whereas in high school, it was kind of on the periphery.
Absolutely.
I think for me, it all kind of started just like in high school, witnessing my mom, who worked in the hospitality industry for over 25 years, be mistreated and always be looked over for promotions and not getting paid the same as some of her peers, all because she didn't have a college degree, with other factors, of course. But I think, like, when I came to OWU, I was like very much in the mentality of I need to get a college degree in order to be successful. And I think what shifted during my 4 years was I needed a college degree to be the person who I was meant to become. And I learned a lot of those soft skills just kind of through interactions every day. I remember very distinctively my first year, my roommates and people from across the hall, for some reason, started talking about like what high school they went to. And they started talking about all these statistics of their high school, and their high school was ranked this, this, and this. I didn't even know they ranked high schools. And I was just like sitting there like, what are you talking about? And I think that those constant small culture shocks that I experienced throughout those 4 years really shifted my educational experience in a lot of positive ways. I think that's why I have so much saliency with the first gen identity.
So let's take a step back for a moment. We have a question from the audience that I think is relevant here. And so let's talk about your college search process, right? So can you share with us what as a first-gen student, what made you, see college as a viable possibility for you? Are there things that you wish you knew that would have helped you in selecting? And how did you end up here as a part of our OWU family?
I think for me, it really wasn't much of a college search. I was going to go to Morehouse College here in Atlanta. That was my goal, or that was where I wanted to go. As far as I knew, I wanted a small liberal arts college. My oldest sister, went to Ohio Northern, and I remember being in kindergarten, and my brother, who's right above me, I was maybe 5 and he was maybe 6, and we rode in the car with, this is like in the 70s, maybe 69. She graduated in 69. So anyway, we're in the car and we drop her off at her dorm, and so that was my first introduction to college, but then, seeing her, as she progressed through college, and my parents also, ingrained in me that, I was going to go to college, and we were going to go to college. So that was kind of ingrained in me, but the search wasn't there. The search they didn't know much about, how do you search schools? How do you, I don't know if they had rankings back then or whatever, but it was more or less, find somewhere where you think you're going to be okay, and also that we can afford. I think money was a big thing, and so the financing at Morehouse kind of fell through, and Ohio Wesleyan, I applied to Ohio Wesleyan. I came sight unseen. I didn't even come. I applied late, decided to come. I just rolled up in September, and that was it. So there wasn't much of a search because, like I say, my parents, they haven't gone to college, so they didn't know, how do you navigate? I don't remember how they did my sister, how they found Ohio Northern for her, but it wasn't a thing where we visited colleges and things like that. It was just find some place, go and make the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not much. There wasn't much of a search on my part. I grew up in Delaware, and so I had always known about OWU, and I just applied to a bunch of different colleges. I don't know why, I had friends doing it, and so I said, I'll just send, I got to do it for free, so I said, why not apply to all these different places? So there wasn't much of a search. The reason why I chose OWU was I was planning on going to OSU Marion or Columbus State. OWU ended up being cheaper than OSU Marion, and so I said, well, why not go here? I don't know. And, because when I first got here, there's students saying, I really wanted a small liberal arts college. And I said, I don't know what that means. But okay. Or, they said, well, their travel program, they have a lot of traveling opportunities. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. I'm just here. So it was honestly just because it was cheaper than OSU Marion. But I couldn't be happier with choosing to go to OWU.
I think my experience is very similar to Mallorie's, of I really didn't know what to look for. A lot of what I knew about colleges was kind of shaped just from media growing up. And so I really didn't understand what it was to be at a small liberal arts school. But I was really fortunate to have a guidance counselor in high school who kind of understood me more than I understood myself, and gave me just a huge list of schools they thought would be a good fit. OWU was on there, and I visited. I was kind of doing a lot of research, and I think it was just kind of like a love at first sight match type deal where I really felt at home here when I visited. And here we are 4.5, 5 years later. I don't know how long later.
Okay, so we have talked about how we have gotten here. Let's talk about being here on campus, right? So we know that sometimes as a first-gen student, there are gaps or things that folks wish they knew that other people seem to already know. So let's talk about those things. What were some gaps that you missed, or things that could have been more useful in your kind of time, either while you were here at the university or when you were here at the university? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I'll go first. I think for me, I wish I had known about more about study abroad programs. Well, I knew about it because, of course, some of my friends, fraternity brothers, they did it. So I was exposed. I knew about it, but I always felt for me that it was maybe out of reach for me. So I really did not know that, there could have been ways to pursue that and make that happen. But I felt that, my circumstances probably would not allow me to do that. So that's one regret that I have, that I wish I had known more about that part and how do I navigate that to make that happen. Because I've known later, after I graduated, I've known someone that was first gen and was able to spend a semester in Spain. So I know it can happen, but back then I just wasn't aware of that, or I felt it was out of reach for me in my circumstances.
I think for me, it kind of started with not even knowing what questions to ask or how to ask them. And then just slowly over time, having people in my life and having mentors being able to kind of teach you some of those more informal things. I think my biggest problems were obviously financial. My mom lost her job around my sophomore year. And so there was a period of time where I owed OWU all this money and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay it. Brad Fulcini just walked me over to the provost and not the provost, the bursar's office, and just walked me through that whole process and explained it to me just like I was a person. I think that we get caught up in the FAFSA and other kind of financial things, and the language itself is kind of a barrier to access. It's hard to understand if you don't have any level of financial literacy, like most 18 to 19-year-olds have. The whole process is confusing. So I think that was probably my biggest struggle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think financial with first gen is obviously a big one. I kind of had a similar experience with Brad. There was one, I think it was around last year, and I got an email. They said, you can't register for classes because you have a balance. And I was like, well, really great to tell me 2 days before registration. I'm not sure where I'm going to get, $3,000 or something. And I had emailed Brad, and it was 10 p.m. the night before. I was so desperate, and situation didn't get solved. And I get out of class, and I remember I walked back to my room and I just laid there and I was like, oh my God, my life is a mess, blah, blah, blah. And then an hour later I said, Mallorie, get yourself together. How bad do you want this? So I walked myself to Brad's office and I caught him. And, Brad worked, I still had to pay it, but he got me to register. But, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have the relationship with Brad that I had. And, I've been really lucky to do that. So, I was part of the summer bridge program, which was really helpful. There were sessions on how to ask for help, which in that situation really helped me. When we were sitting there, I was like, this is dumb. I'm wasting the rest of my summer. I got to know Brad from doing WCSA, and I went on a TPG with Brad. And so I was pretty close with him. And if I didn't know Brad, I wouldn't have gotten any help with that. But I think other gaps are, for me, something that I see is I get a lot of help and I've gotten to do a lot of things as a first gen student. But I think a lot of that is because I fit the mold of what a good student looks like, whether or not I agree with it. And so I think that more people are comfortable with me doing things, or because a lot of my other first gen friends, they're like, they're not a great student, and they don't get recommended for a lot of things. Or I think that there's a lot of conversation about fitting into or creating a sense of belonging at school. And a lot of that centers around, expecting first gen students to assimilate to higher ed. And I don't always agree with that. I think that there could also be some pushback on what a university is like. But then I also think in our conversations about first gen, there's always a conversation about not belonging in school. But then once you kind of fit into school, you feel like you don't belong so much at home. And so struggling with that, not really fitting in either place, the conversation about not fitting in at home isn't always there. And I think Dylan and I both have done things to try and create space for those conversations because that's not always an easy thing to talk about. And then also just, it's nice there's a few professors that I know, and sometimes, if I just, they also have working class roots, and kind of being able to talk about what it's like to be at OWU with that and be like, man, this person, they thought housekeeping was going to clean up their mess. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Stuff like that has been really good, but I don't think it's on the level that I would like to see it, I guess.
Well, and I mean, I think I would underscore a lot of what you all have said, right? So I think some of the gaps we see with first generation students is how, they navigate some of these systems, right? So other folks have parents or guardians who may be able to call and ask financial aid questions, or if there's a roommate situation, to call and, change rooms or do any of those things. But there are times when, folks within our first gen community are the ones who have to navigate those situations themselves, and sometimes stay in situations or do things that are harmful because they don't know, the right avenues or the right people to talk to, right? And so again, to underscore your point, Mallorie, I think, trying to find ways that we are creating spaces where people can belong. And the idea of belonging is you can show up in the fullness of who you are and still gain access to resources, services, goods, all of those things is what we're looking for, and not the fitting in, because the fitting in is more like assimilate to this group, as opposed to like being the fullness of who you are and still getting all the things that you need to be well and to be successful. So you're right. I think other things that just to point out, there is a summer bridge program that is out of OMSA, right? There was a hiatus in 2020 because of COVID. It is our hope that we are bringing it back in 2021. And again, the goal of that program, it's a 3-week program. Students get 2 college credits for being in that program. They get interpersonal skills with other participants. There's a mentorship component. In years past, the Summer Bridge program has provided backpacks for students, passports, laptops for those who are eligible. But again, the gift and the curse of this program is it's funded by donors. And so again, it's one of those things that if I were to say, hey, how can alumni be helpful in this conversation? It's, the funding of that process as well. And again, for us to try to figure out, again, who attendees would be leaving out and who that they may be supporting, right? So some folks have to leave work 3 weeks early. That is a financial toll. And so those are things that we also need to be able to work through in this process as well. But also thinking that there's a UC 160 course. And so those courses also have different pockets that they serve from time to time, right? So trying to make sure that we are connecting students, making sure that they have the resources that they need are going to be important as a part of our process. So let's jump back to something that you mentioned, Mallorie. You mentioned like cultural norms and trying to reconnect with family or community members and try to, be a student. So let's go there. So we know that first generation students have unique life experiences as a result of attending a college or university, right? And these can be different from their parents, from community members, from family. Have you encountered any of these cultural differences? So thinking about how you navigate university, joining Greek organizations, studying abroad, actually earning a degree, or are there other cultural or social struggles that you have encountered as a result of being a first generation student?
I think for me, kind of getting on what kind of Mallorie discussed it as far as belonging, on campus or at home. I think for me, I was fortunate in that my friends from high school, we all went to college. We were all first gen, but we all went away to college, and so we can commiserate with each other. We didn't have email or cell phones back then, so we would have to write each other letters or call or see each other when we were back home in Cincinnati. So I had that support system. Then also my brother, who was a year older than me, he was first gen like me. He was at Miami, but I knew friends of mine that had situations where maybe their family members didn't understand or was very somewhat not supportive of the mission, where, so they had that sense of, I don't really belong at home. I've had conversations with friends of mine in high school who were in that situation that didn't have the support or the understanding of the mission. I think for me, I was fortunate that, my parents, this is the mission. My friends, I have a large extended family, so some of my cousins, we were all in the same situation. We were all kind of learning together. It was kind of like the blind leading the blind. We didn't have like parents or uncles or aunts who had been to college who can tell us, hey, this is what you need to do. This is Black financial aid. This is about time management. These are the do's and the don'ts. We were kind of just learning on the fly on our own, sharing information, sharing, the good and ugly with one another. So I think for me, that was kind of leaning to what Mallorie was saying, is that having that support, and I think for me, and then even on campus, how do you assimilate? How do you belong on campus, especially when there's so many students that are fluent, have these backgrounds they've been to Paris, they've been to London, they've done this, they've done that, how do you navigate that, and I think, and there's that, there's that temptation to kind of shy away from that, or not really kind of, I don't want to say be ashamed of who you're, but it's still that you're comparing yourselves with others, and that happens, and looking back, how do you navigate that? How do you, because it's not like you're not equal, you're just that your life experience is different. You may have to worry about, as Dylan says, tuition, or your parents get fired or get laid off, or and then money becomes an issue. How do you navigate that? How do you share that? And I think part of it is just, being who you are, and also surrounding yourself with friends who understand that, who can respect that. And then and I think it's a give and take. I mean, we learn a lot from being on campus, being exposed to a lot of different things. Like one of my freshman year, I never forget, one of my pledge brothers, his parents came in from Buffalo for homecoming. He said, "Oh, you come out to dinner with my parents?" I said, "Okay." And we went to a dinner, this fancy place in Columbus. It was like, I don't know what building it was, downtown Columbus. We were on the very top floor. And we had to make reservations. I mean, I had never been to a place where you had to make reservations for dinner. I mean, that was just so foreign to me. But in that, so being exposed to different things, but also, they being exposed to you, being exposed to you, saying that your life is different. You didn't, you're here at Ohio Wesleyan, but your life is different. And I think that just grows empathy, but people understanding that, hey, I come from this situation, or, we're still human. We're all human, but just our backgrounds are different. And like I said, how do you navigate that? How do you still be you in that, and not be tempted to kind of compare your lives to others? And I think it's kind of like what first gens navigate, have to deal with. We all do that.
Yeah. I remember when I did the bridge program, and it was before it had started, and I had sent an email to Charles, and I said, he was the old OMSA director, and I was like, is there any way that I could work a few hours, or do I have to be at OWU 24/7? And he was like, and Charles said, do you need something financially? And I remember I was like, oh, I'm not asking, that's not what I'm asking. That shame in asking for help. And, I didn't know Charles then. I think if I had that problem a year from then, I would have said yes. But, things like that, or always having to work. So I missed out on a lot because I would always have to work. Or still to this day, I hear students talking about internships that they have, and it just happened today. My classmates are talking about, oh, I'm looking at this internship and blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, I probably should get on that. I totally forgot. Or just balancing being able to have an internship and having to work, or, again, asking for help, things like office hours. I knew kind of what office hours were, but one thing I didn't know was, I was like, the office hours that are put on the syllabus is the only time that they're free. So I said, well, I can't, I have to work when they have office hours. So I said, I guess I just can't meet with them. And then they're like, no, you can email me and we can find a time to meet or whatever. or the food at the dining hall, all I hear is how bad it is. I think it's fine. I remember one day they had carrots and there were, I thought carrots were only orange, and they had carrots that were purple. And I was like, what is this? And I remember I sent a picture to my brother and I was like, this is crazy. This food, I was like, weird. Eating Brussels sprouts, salmon. I said, this is fine. But then I think on the other side of, you know, different experiences at home was, you know, I went out of the country for the first time after my freshman year for a TPG that was focused on first gen students. So it was me and Paul Dean, who is first gen, does a lot of the first gen stuff, a sociology professor, and two other first gen students. And, you know, it was my first time it was my first time riding a plane. And it was really nice to be able to have those conversations about how we've all kind of had similar backgrounds. But then, you know, at home, every time I'd tell someone, like, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to Denmark. Then they'd ask me, they were like, how's Amsterdam? And I was like, not the same thing, but very close to the idea. But there's a lot of things that, you know, whether it be applying for scholarships or, you know, one thing was my parents didn't understand the homework load. And I was like, yeah, I have homework. And they're like, you've been doing homework for like 2 hours. And I was like, yeah, homework in college is a lot different than homework in high school. You don't just, it isn't an hour and you're done. I was like, it is totally different. So it's definitely been, it was quite a culture shock. And it still is a little bit.
Yeah, I really share what Craig and Mallorie have said. I think Mallorie spoke to this earlier of, as my journey through OWU continued, I really struggled to connect with my family about what I was experiencing, because they had no frame of reference to like understand what I was going through, like what I was really studying even, or even like this like person I was becoming. I think that was really hard for a long time because, you know, in higher education, we talk about challenge versus support all the time. And I was being challenged plenty, but I really didn't feel support outside of OWU. And I think that at times, maybe that was unhealthy because all my support was just embedded within OWU and the culture that OWU is. And I think that as my kind of years went on and I developed a lot of like those informal skills, I just grew a lot as a person. I think when you go back home, especially because you're, my mom lived kind of far away, I'd only see her every few months. She got to see just like how different I was every time I got home, where for me, it was just my lived experience. So I think that's like just a huge cultural aspect that it took me a while to process. And similar to what Mallorie said, I never really left the Midwest before I came to college. And then by the end of college, I had studied abroad, been to all these different places, was able to go on 3 different spring break trips to all around the world. Just really invaluable experiences that I hold to this day. And now I'm really lucky I get to facilitate some of that for students at the institution I work at.
So I heard a couple of connections about some oh shoot moments of like, whew, I don't know if this is the right thing for me. And a couple of moments of like, hey, I got it, right? So we have a question from the audience and I'll frame it in this way. Are there any moments that you're like, stand out to you where you're like, I don't know if this is the right move for me and maybe I'm gonna do something different? And are there any moments where you were like, hey, I got it. I know that graduation is in my future because of maybe this moment or this experience or this connection with an individual?
I think for me, it was freshman year pledging a white fraternity. I mean, that was the last thing I thought I would do. Like, you know, not only did my parents not go to college, you know, even my siblings that went, they didn't pledge any fraternities or sorority. I was, you know, so when I did it, I was really like, you know, how are they going to take this? My parents, how are they going to take this? And to this day, they really never said anything. You know, I guess they were kind of like, you know, well, if that's what you want to do or whatever. But it was just that moment where I thought, well, I'm here, you know, and it was a factor of all the people that I met were, the guys I met were in Thompson, and we were all just, and I didn't know what fraternity rush was. You know, it was just like these parties on the hill. So you just go, and I didn't know it was rush until someone said, well, this is what this is. I'm like, oh, but it was just not having that frame of reference and then actually doing it. I think that was the moment for me, is like, I'm really doing this, and I wrote to some of my friends from back home, I'm like, I'm doing this. And they were like, are you sure you want to do that? And so, but I thought, but I think that was one of the best decisions. I think that is kind of getting involved on campus, be it athletics, Greek life, clubs. That's what kept me there. I met a lot of my friends. I'm still friends with a lot of those guys in the house, even though I graduated over 35 years ago. So that was that. I think that was a key moment in my career, just jumping out, doing that, never knowing what that entails, what the expectations was, being the only African American in the fraternity. Well, I just did it, and it worked out for the best. So I was treasurer junior year, and so it taught me a lot, as far as interpersonal skills. I grew a lot because of it. I'm sure, like Dylan said, your parents realize, how you're changing when you're coming home for your breaks, and you're saying different things, you're doing some different things. But yeah, it was just, that was kind of one of my aha moments, was doing that.
Thanks, Mallorie.
Yeah, I think one thing was actually, and Dr. Nestor is here. I remember, I think it was last year, whatever. She'd asked me about grad school, which we're not too sure still about. But I remember when she first asked me, I was like, I just learned what grad school was like last week, so I don't really know. Because I was like, wait, you have to go on to school again. And so I was like, well, I don't know. Because then I also had no idea how that worked. But then I think one time I was like, I don't know if I can do this, was for mock convention, which is like a huge, like this big event that OWU does about the presidential nominating convention. And I remember Sally had told me I needed to do it. And then a few of my professors were like, Mallorie, you're really into politics, you need to do this. And I was like, yeah, I know. Everyone's told, like, I'm going to go to the meeting. And I emailed Dr. Beiser and I was like, I just want to be on a committee. I want to maybe have a toe in, just that. I said, I don't even want to be a chair committee. I don't really know what I'm doing. And Dr. Beiser was like, okay, like, let's meet with me in my office or whatever. And so we were talking, and then she goes, she goes, well, what about co-director? And I was like, no, I didn't ask that. I said, I didn't even want a position at all. But it was just like right then, and I was like, I don't know if I want to say no. And so I agreed to it. And I remember walking out of her office after I agreed to it, and I was like, I don't think I made the right decision. I said, I don't know what I just signed up for. I've never done anything like this. And so I was like, I don't know if and I just was like not confident in myself. But yeah, I think things like that, every time the first few years of like walking up to a professor's office, I was always so tempted to turn around. And there were a few times that I did that I was like, oh, I'm not going to go to their office. I'm going to ask them a stupid question. I don't need to do this. And so getting over that of like, Mallorie, even if you ask a stupid question, it's okay. Just, really, I think the key is you have to push yourself, even when you get uncomfortable and maybe you feel like you don't deserve to be doing whatever you want. Yeah, that's been probably one of the biggest lessons is pushing yourself and asking for help, and also trusting yourself, I think.
For me, one of the biggest moments I had in undergrad was after my sophomore year. I did the Summer on the Cuyahoga program, which is essentially an internship program in Cleveland where you get matched with an intern site, free housing, really great experience, but a lot of the other schools that this program partners with are Ivy League level schools. So Cornell, Yale, Harvard, and my internship was in marketing, which I don't know why I thought that'd be a good idea, but in retrospect. And I realized halfway through the summer, as we all would get performance evaluations throughout the summer, I was like, wow, I can kind of keep up with these guys, these people from Cornell and Yale and Harvard, and always seem to have everything together and always seem to know what to say, what to do within our internship space. And although I had to work harder to kind of catch up, I very quickly realized that I was at the same level as them, even though we had this idea that certain schools are better and more elite than others. I think for me, that was just a really eye-opening experience of I could really achieve things if I just put all the energy I can into it. And there might be circumstances where I have to work harder than other people. But I have all the skills and backgrounds that I need to be successful.
Thank you all for sharing that. And shout out to our educators, Sally and Dr. Nesta. Yeah, challenge and support. We love to see it, so we appreciate it. All right, so let me now turn to you, Craig. So as a first generation student yourself, you felt the need to create some support systems for other first gen folks. Can you talk to us about what you decided to do and why that was important for you?
Yeah, I currently serve on the board of trustees at Ohio Wesleyan. So and this is my 6th year, so I'll be rolling off on June 30th. But for me, just looking at how, first gen, the struggles or the challenges, I should say, that first generation students have, I went on and endowed a scholarship that is dedicated for first year students. And because it just, the challenges that first gen students is, a lot of it's financial, but then a lot of it is cultural and how do we matriculate. You don't have the support systems, be it at home. And back in the 80s, we didn't really have it. We didn't have it on campus as you may do now. But it's just important. And it's every little bit helps. It's not a huge scholarship but it is, every little bit helps. And I think if it eases a student's mind, like Mallorie, if it eases her mind and says, hey, I don't have to worry about this, I don't have to worry about money for books, then that's huge. I mean, it may not be a lot of money, but it's huge in these students' lives. So I think for me, it was the same thing. I was, heavily financial aid, but I think it was a junior year. My father decided to retire, and I'm still a junior in college, and my brother was in college also. And so he just said, so he called me, we talked, he said, well, you can just transfer to Miami, it's a public school, your brother's there, it's less expensive, not thinking that I had built my life here, at Ohio Wesleyan. I'm 20, whatever, I've built my life, I have my support, I have my circle. But if your parents don't, and what this is all about, if your parents don't really understand that, don't get that, hey, you don't just pack up and go to another school. I mean, if you don't have to, I mean, a lot of times, your school is where you build life, your friends, your network, your support. And so kind of like Mallorie, I went to financial aid and said, hey, my circumstances are changing. And so they work with me with that. So it's just, I share that because, Mallorie and Dylan, we've gone through this, but and it's real, and it happens. But if, with a small scholarship can help, students not worry about help with books or help with some expenses, I'm all for it. So.
Well, we appreciate it. And yes, I think, being in my position, I know that these scholarships are important for students, right? To sometimes get them over the hurdle, sometimes as a part of their overall package. So we appreciate donations and endowments like this. So thank you. All right, so we're almost to the end of our time. Let's talk about advice. So as first gen, what advice would we give to other first gen students What advice would we maybe offer to parents, guardians, family members, community members? And are there tangible things that we could ask folks to do that would be supportive? Anyone is free to start.
I can start. I think this is probably for future students, and I don't think that anyone's on here, but I could not stress enough how impactful the Summer Bridge program was for me. I from it helped build community. We all lived together for 3 weeks. The programming at the time when we were actually sitting in there and listening to the different presentations, whether it was asking for help, they had all the different offices on campus talk to us. So career services, student involvement. There was like a class that we didn't get credit for the class, but I still really liked the class. Sitting there, we were like, we are inside. It's our last 3 weeks of summer. What are we doing here? But as time goes on, the lessons that we learned just get more and more valuable for me. And I think it's also nice that not everyone in the program was first gen, but most of us were. And so, we each know each other. And so it's kind of like, who you can go to. And I think it also just gives you it makes it a little bit easier to ease into college. And I really cannot stress enough how impactful that program was for me. And I think for me, one of the mentors that I had from that program said, Mallorie, you should join WCSA. And so I joined it the fall semester of my freshman year, which most freshmen don't. They usually wait a semester. And that was really, really impactful too. I encourage almost everyone to join WCSA. There's someone on here that is also first gen, and I had her join WCSA because you really learn so much about how OWU works, and you make a lot of different connections. And I think it's just one, you get first gen students and their voices in WCSA, which doesn't usually happen. And then 2, you learn about OWU and you kind of, you're like, I didn't even know all these clubs existed. And so Chloe said she didn't have much of a choice. Chloe is a first gen student that I kind of took under my wing. And she has taught me a lot. And so it's been really nice. But I also think I have it here with me. I can type it in the chat, but this book, Limbo, and it talks about that straddling concept of being first gen. And it's a book that's taught in the UC 160 class for first gen students. And it has really helped me understand my experience. And I read it, and my twin brother's girlfriend, who is not first gen, she comes from her parents, one of her parents has a PhD. And so she read it, and she, it's been good for us to kind of have conversations about her experience in college is a lot different. She's like, there's a lot of pressure on me. And so I think that we've had a lot of really good conversations. And so I recommend that book for people who are first gen, but then also people who aren't, because I think it gives a good picture of what the first gen experience is like, and how it isn't always, easy going from, being working class to middle class. It's not, oh, well, I'm better off now. Like it's not that easy. But I think 2 things is the bridge program and WCSA have been really, really great for me.
My biggest piece of advice is just to learn how to advocate for yourself. I look back often and just think about all the mistakes I made and things I could have done differently if I just knew how to advocate for myself, and talk about some of the things I was going through. I think that there's this notion when you're first gen that you need to somehow act tough and be tough and be resilient, don't let anything bother you. I think there's many experiences that now I look back upon and I realize that if I would have handled that situation differently, if I would have had certain sets of skills, the situations could have played out very differently. I also think a lot about this idea of first gen students usually coming from places where they don't have a lot of control in life. And college is this weird place where you both equally have a ton of control over yourself and your situation, and none at all at the same time. And I think that's very difficult for first-gen students, especially because you want to do as much as possible to control your situation, to graduate, get your degree, when in reality, there's just too many factors and too many external things that you just can't control. So my second piece of advice is to be comfortable and to work on being comfortable with this idea that you just can't control things, and that's okay.
I actually have a whole list of things. I mean, because I'm thinking about, I guess I had a longer time, 35 years to kind of think about this, but versus a year or current student. But I think for me, I think campus involvement, advice to say first gen. I think campus involvement is critical. You know, building those networks, building those friends, being part of the community. A lot of times, you know, kids go to college and sometimes they become isolated because they are not part of having found their niche on campus or within the community. So I think finding that niche, be it Greek life, be it athletics, be it clubs, you know, finding that niche, building that network, being part of the community. I would also say, don't be afraid to ask for help. I think we've all talked about that. Dylan talked about it. Mallorie talked about it. I talked about it. Asking for help, professors, the financial aid office, you know, being that advocate for yourself, as Dylan said. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Also, kind of along what Dylan says, kind of as far as comfort, being confident in who you are. You know, your background, what you bring is just as important. You know, you should not, don't compare yourself just because you haven't been to Paris or London or had these fancy vacations or went to a prep school doesn't mean that you're not as important as anyone else or you don't deserve to be there. It's being comfortable in who you are because you're learning from them, but also others are learning from, you may not know, but others are learning from you. I mean, I've had some of my friends say, oh, I didn't know, you know, you went through this, or I didn't know, you know, you were always so strong and so resilient. Or someone told me, oh, you know, you were the voice, you know, you were the voice of reason. I said, well, I was just as confused as everyone else, but people think, you know, since you're first gen, you know, at least they talk about that resilience and, you know how to handle things. So, but being comfortable who you are and being open, but also surround yourself, you know, with people who respect you, who know you, who respect you for who you are. And also don't believe something's out of reach. You know, like my biggest mistake was not taking advantage of, you know, study abroad, thinking because of my circumstances that was something that was out of reach. I known where to go or who to be an advocate of that, you know, maybe that could have turned out differently for me. But, you know, overall, my experience was great in being first gen. And I've, you know, since then, you know, since this has become a topic, you know, I've had some time to think about, wow, I guess I was first gen. And, you know, what did that mean? So I've had some time to kind of reflect on that. You know, being African American was one thing, but also now being first gen, you know, that adds another, you know, layer of complexity and challenges. So I think, you know, that advice I think is very good, you know, just being confident who you are, you know, being engaged on campus, because it's all about social mobility. You know, colleges like Ohio Wesleyan that, you know, colleges that changes lives, you know, it's about us that come from, you know, first gen. Then I, you know, look back on my career and my life and what I've done since then. You know, I've never been out of the country until after I graduated. You know, the first time I was on a plane was freshman year. The first time I saw the ocean was junior year in college. So those experiences, I mean, people are, you know, other students gonna take that for granted, you know, going to the beach when they're like one, you know, versus me. You know, it's a different experience, but not to discount it and not to it's important and it's a perspective that needs to be out there, that needs to be shared, and it just creates empathy. And that's a big word now in our national discourse is empathy for one another. So I think that is and this breeds that, you know, having that empathy and having those connections.
I mean, I think things that I will underscore is layered identities. Layering with the first gen status are going to be important, right? So again, that makes everybody's journey a different journey. I have put in the chat a couple of resources. So there are a couple of apps. So Homework app and My Study Life app are good apps that folks can use. You can put in your syllabi into these apps, and they will alert you when things are due, and some of those things that are helpful. Through the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs, we are having another conversation about supporting first-gen students that everybody is welcome to. It's a lunch and learn on March 19th, so that's a thing. But before we end, we're at time, but I'd like to end our conversation with what's given you joy this week? So in your world, what's bringing you joy this week? I will tell you, since you all are thinking, what's given me joy this week are bad dad jokes. I'm not a dad, but I love these jokes. I keep bugging my family, telling them all these terrible jokes. I'll give you one. I used to hate facial hair, but then it grew on me. See, awful, and I still love them. So what is bringing you all joy this week?
I think for me, I was looking forward to this. I think, on my way, I was running an errand today, and just thinking about this experience and how it has shaped me, and for the better. Having gone to a school sight unseen, the amazing experience that I have, and even the connections that I still have through Ohio Wesleyan. So I think for me, it was. I guess the joy of this week was probably me, was kind of just, looking forward to this event.
Sweet.
I'm pretty similar to what Craig said. In my graduate program, there's about 40 of us all in a cohort together, and we talk almost every day about our college experiences because we're in the program. And just to hear the stories people have and to understand the relationships they have with their institutions, it reminds me of just how special OWU is, and the community and really the family I had at OWU. It's just so very different and so very special. And now that I'm about a year detached from it, moments like this are very joyful for me. So I'm gonna just steal what Craig said.
Thanks, Mallorie.
Yeah, I was definitely looking forward to this. This has been really, really great. Last night I got to watch another student and one of my friends. She was on a panel for an organization, The Church Must Lead, talking about anti-racism, and she talked about her advocacy. And I'm doing an independent study that's really, really fun, and I've done a lot of reading this week, but it was all really good. And so I was like pretty proud of myself because I didn't think I was going to get it done. But yeah, that's been my joy, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for the panelists for joining us this evening. Thanks for inviting me to moderate this conversation. I will add another bad joke in the chat, and I'll tag Katie back in.
Thank you so much, Jason. Great job moderating. I know if we were all in person, we'd be giving a round of applause to everyone. And I just want to say thanks to Craig, Mallorie, and Dylan for sharing your stories and perspectives. I know I learned so much from all of you, and I'm sure others did. And we titled it The Future of OWU for a reason, because this is the future. First generation students are the future of Ohio Wesleyan. And support for these students, as you've heard from Mallorie, Dylan, and Craig, is really important. And you all can play a really big role in that through volunteering to help be a resource for students, to have conversations, to help navigate, and also through your philanthropy. So keep that in mind as you think about how you want to get engaged with Ohio Wesleyan. We did just start our first gen task force for alumni that met last week. And if that is something that you're interested in, there's a lot of ways, again, that we're going to make connection. I also have to say the Future of OWU, I think, was interesting as words as well, because clearly Craig has taken his time at Ohio Wesleyan and really has given back in his volunteerism and in his philanthropy. And then listening to Mallorie and Dylan, I mean, I'm so excited for you both too, as you graduate and go on as alumni, and Dylan's already actively involved, and Mallorie, you don't even know it yet, but you're on a list and you're gonna be involved more because both you guys are shining stars. And so we're just really fortunate. So thank you all for joining us. We'll send out a survey. I'd love your feedback, any way that you want to share how you want to support Ohio Wesleyan or get more involved, you can do that at that time. And just thank you again. We look forward to seeing you at one of our future virtual events, and hopefully soon in the nearer future in person. But until then, thank you all for joining us and have a great night.